Oh man, Kingdom Come Deliverance. Let's get this review started off by saying that the sequel comes out in just a few days, and I am still going to play it. But as you can see in the title and maybe the name of the video, I did not finish this game. Who knows if I will finish the second game. There are so many pain points that caused me to stop playing it that I couldn't justify following it through to the end. So this is going to be my review of playing about 40 hours of this game and then giving up. So I'm going to explain why that is, but why I love the game at the same time and while I'll be playing the sequel. So the first thing that I want to do is cover all the highlights. This game has a lot of highlights, but it's got one major negative that we'll talk about on the back end, and I'm sure most of you watching this already know what that is, but I'll save it for the end. But on to the highlights of this game. Boy, there are a ton. I loved a lot of things about this game, and we're going to kind of run through all of them. Now, first things first, this game came out in 2018, and I always wanted to go back and play it or try it at some point. It seemed like a super unique RPG that has never been made before, and seemingly has never been made since until the sequel comes out in a couple days. It's got super deep engrossing elements that have to do with weirdly survival mechanics where you have to eat and sleep properly, you have to manage any wounds that you have, but then you also have these level up mechanics that are kind of like Oblivion and other systems like that. So overall, the story, the world, the RPG elements, and everything come together to coalesce into something that is beautiful. And those are the parts that I really enjoyed about the game. Now, I bought the game on PS4 because I am a sucker for having physical media. I know, we're in a digital age and everybody loves to have their digital content, and my Steam library is just as big as anyone else's. But if I can get a game on console and have that disc for the rest of my life to be able to go back and play it, then I prefer to play it that way. Even if it's not the most beautiful, the most graphically demanding thing in the world. Because my PC is going to run the game better. It is better. But I chose to play it on console because, for one, that's how a majority of other players were able to play the game, right? It sold pretty well on console just like it did on PC. But this is strictly going to be a review for the PlayStation version. So keep that in mind just in case you see some of the gameplay and it seems kind of slow, because it is. It's stuck at like 30 frames. It's pretty rough. But overall, the game was an accomplishment that I enjoyed playing. So outside of that overview, we're going to get started on the story. The story is one of the things that grabbed me. It starts off a little bit slow, describing Henry with his family and friends and his local community and how he kind of meshes well with them. Or sometimes not so well, because apparently they were going to go throw shit at someone's house within the first couple minutes of the game. Him and his friends were angry about something. They had a disagreement with someone, so they were going to go pick up some shit and throw it at their house that was freshly painted. Wow, what an opening. But then that leads into, at the very beginning, this is not going to be a spoiler because it's how the game pretty much starts, but his family gets killed by a large group of enemies coming in and kind of just taking over his entire town and castle that is behind his home. The lord of the area ends up having to leave to go to another local lord and get support from them so they don't get completely gutted. Now, with that, his entire town, city, whatever you want to call it, gets completely destroyed and pretty much burned down to the ground. And well, Henry, whenever he ends up going to this other castle temporarily, wants to return back home to bury his family. His mother and father, they were killed right in front of him. And of course, the number one thing is he wants to be able to bury them, but also to possibly look into getting any clues for revenge on these people. Well, after he shows up there and he's starting to get everything together to bury his family, this leads into a small group of bandits coming in and just kind of kicking his ass. And they take the sword that his father created for the Lord. And he ends up getting saved by some people, and they end up burying his family because he gets knocked out. But then he goes on this conquest to kind of get revenge for them taking the sword now, but then also serving the lords of the area. So he ends up under the command of Sir Radzig, and that kind of leads on this giant investigation to determine who these bad guys are that showed up and kind of burned everything down, but also where they came from, what their plans are next, and how they plan to take over the rest of the country pretty much. You start learning about these different factions that are vying for rule and how one lord is doing one thing to kind of appease them or to go with them or fight against them. And then you go into a town that they don't agree with their lord, or they think differently, or maybe they're being attacked by bandits that are from both sides of it. There's a lot of intrigue here in the story, and some of it is randomly done through side quests, some of it is part of the main story quest. But the story is a 10 out of 10, really. It grabbed my attention from the very start, and it never really let go at all. I was engaged the entire time. I loved every second of it, and if it weren't for the negatives of the game, I would have played it all the way through just for the story. Leading into the next part is the gameplay. So the gameplay is first person, of course. You're running around with swords and shields and knight's armor, but you first start off as a peasant and you don't really have any of that. So the gameplay is going to kind of go along with progression here. I'm going to keep those very similar, but the overall gameplay in combat is you have this system where you have 5 different directions to attack from, such as overhead, and then like top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. And those are the different parts of the body that you end up striking in combat. You can also poke them, you can do these kind of special attacks, and then you also have ranged combat with bow and arrows, but that's pretty much it for the most part. Now, of course, you do not spend a ton of time in combat. The majority of the gameplay is running around in this large, massive open world. You end up getting a horse at some point, and you can go anywhere and do pretty much anything. And running around, adventuring, talking to people, learning about the local economy or the people within it is what grabbed my attention the most. Because the gameplay of having these conversations and kind of learning about one specific character or situation, and then using that information to resolve something somewhere else. Now that's going to go into the progression portion that I'm going to talk about here, which is the RPG elements. So this game is massively, deeply rooted in RPG elements. By that I mean, every time you perform an action, you're pretty much going to level that up. Different cities have different reputation levels where you can gain or lose reputation, and that'll cause you to lose negotiations when you're trying to barter with people, or maybe you're trying to persuade someone to do something for you, and you're going to lose that if your reputation is too low. But then you also have other stats that are determined specifically based upon your outfit, how dirty you are, maybe the type of clothes that you're wearing specifically. Are you wearing some nice cloth, or are you wearing a bunch of armor with chainmail? Well, that's going to change the way that you converse with people and the way that you're able to progress the story or different characters. You come up to someone who's more regal in nature, and they're going to want you to dress nicely. And if you try to talk to them nicely while wearing all this armor, you're not going to pass that check. But instead, you can intimidate them. So you've got all this armor, these weapons, and everything else, and well, they probably don't have anything but a dagger on them. So you could just simply intimidate them enough to where, hey, you get your way. Will they be happy about that? Will you probably lose reputation? Yeah, you're goddamn right you will. But that's all part of it. You have so many choices on the things that you can do. You can knock someone out in their sleep and take them outside to be able to beat them up or kill them. You can steal from anybody in the world pretty much. You can choose to tackle every combat situation ranged, melee, or run away for the most part. And then getting deeper into the progression itself, every time that you perform an action, you're gonna pretty much level it up. So running around gets you agility and stamina. When all of these other subcategories of levels rise enough, then you will get a max level increase. And that leads into perks. So if you level up your bow and arrow and your sword and your running and all this other stuff, you can possibly get a perk for that. Now the perks are pretty dynamic in nature, where the majority of them will have a positive and a negative. Some of them just have positives. But one of the ones that I picked up early in the game was I can sprint very, very fast. But I also lose stamina very, very fast. Or you can be a marathon runner. And whenever you're a marathon runner, well, your stamina goes down super slowly. But you do run a little slower. You can run for a much larger distance compared to running very fast to catch up with someone. Now, I didn't know the implication of this because I picked it within the first 4 or 5 hours of playing the game, and picking that faster one didn't really help. I really wish I picked the other one. Now, I don't know if I missed a respec person or something else out there, but once I made that decision, that was done. Because the way that the perks work sometimes, specifically for this one and a few others, when you pick one, you lose the other. So you can't have the marathon runner and the sprinter at the same time. You gotta choose one. And this goes for different systems such as your speech as well, where you can choose to have extra charisma whenever you talk to a lord of the land or someone in higher ranking. And whenever you choose that, you have less charisma when talking to townspeople or lower ranking people, and vice versa. You can have it higher with talking to townspeople, but lower with the nobles. And these are choices that you're going to have to make, which makes the RPG side of it so engaging in that way. So not only do you gain levels in almost everything that you do, you have to constantly eat or else you'll be malnourished, and then your stamina will lower, your health will lower, you have to sleep on a regular basis or else your stats will lower from that as well. You can get perks that allow you to sleep better in beds and sleep worse whenever you're out in a tent, or you can sleep better when you're just on a stack of hay, and if you lay in a bed, you're going to be uncomfortable. Those are the gives and takes of this RPG level up perk system, which I loved. I could tailor my character to be exactly how I wanted him to be. This Henry was my Henry, and I was going to take him throughout the world and do everything that I could to make him as fucking cool as I wanted him to be, or as lazy as I wanted him to be. You can also choose to ignore quest completely or kill main story characters. It's any choice goes. Now, the next part that I'm going to talk about is the world and the environment. Now, the world itself is super engaging in the way that, of course, all the characters and the towns and cities kind of coalesce and they come together. But it's all a little bland. One zone looks very much like another zone. They don't really have any unique features behind them. They all just look like rolling hills in medieval times in Europe, which is beautiful by all means. This game is gorgeous. Even on a PS4, from a game that's 7 years ago, it looks great. Some of the small annoyances that I have though is whenever you're kind of running around in the open world, you can get stuck pretty easily. Now, there are a lot of bushes in this world, and I want to point this out very specifically, because whether you're running on your 2 fucking feet or you're on a horse, if you come across some bushes that are too thick, GG, brother, try again, because you are actually stuck and you will not be able to get out of them. If you come across some bushes and you end up getting into them in some way, shape, or form, you cannot get out. On multiple occasions, I was running through a forest and some bushes popped up. I tried to maybe jump over them or just go around them, and my horse would glitch into them, or I would try to jump over them with my body and I would end up inside of it, and you cannot get out of it once you're inside of it. It's fucking terrible. Now, I totally get it because I probably wasn't supposed to end up inside of it anyways, but sometimes there are ones that have gaps that allow you to go in between them, and that allows you to run right through it. And sometimes there are some very thick bushes on the outskirts of a forest where you have to actually go right through them to enter the forest. You don't have another option. There's not a way to go around. You have to go through these bushes. And those you can. But then there's another set of bushes that are 30 feet away that you can't go through whatsoever. So small gripe on that with the bushes, and I know that's so dumb, but it was a pretty big annoyance nonetheless. I also wanted to mention how dark this game can get. God damn, this game is actually pretty real in the idea of you have to go to sleep at night because otherwise it's going to be so dark that you can't see anything. It reminds me a lot of Dragon's Dogma, where if you go out at night, you have to have a torch, and you're not going to be able to traverse the world or do anything because it's so dark that you're going to trip over your own feet. So if you're going to go out at night, bring a torch. And a small comment about the torches. Funny thing, my first day playing the game, I was running around in the city, turned nighttime, did not know that there was a law that required you to have a torch at night, or else you're considered like a thieving bandit, right? So a random guard approached me and was like, "Hey, where's your torch?" And I was like, "What the fuck you talking about?" He goes, "Well, time to go to jail, bud." I did not know that I had broken the law by not having a torch. So I learned through the gameplay elements and by going through this that, hey, when you enter a city, you gotta have a torch at night, man. So you can run around in this open world in which you can also fast travel in. The fast travel system is actually pretty cool. So let me tell you about this one real quick. So fast travel, you open up the world map, you click a city or whatever it is that you've unlocked that fast travel location for, and then you go to travel to it. You will lose time, nutrition, and energy, which is part of the RPG elements behind it. But along the path, you might come across a group of bandits or someone who's trying to, sell you something, or someone who's trying to trick you into something, whatever it might be. Random things that happen on the road in this rural little area in Europe. And well, you can choose to either stop and engage with it, or you can keep trying to chug along, but you're going to have to pass a check on that. So there's a 75% chance that you may get through it, and maybe you don't have to stop your fast travel progression. Or you fail the check, and then you've got 5 bandits in front of you all whacking the shit out of you until you die. And that's the way the cookie crumbles. Now, that's leading into some of the negatives I have, but the world and environment is pretty good overall. I'm definitely not going to say I wasn't engaged throughout it, but it could have used a little bit more diversity within it. Some of the zones could have had something that was just a little bit better looking, but it was very real feeling. In no way, shape, or form did I feel like I was ever outside of what that country actually may have looked like hundreds of years ago. Now, moving on from the world and everything else onto the audio and the music. Now, the audio design is pretty top-notch. Every character is voice acted very, very well. I don't know how they got the money for the budget on this, but every single character is voice acted from top to bottom, even your random townsfolk. And the majority of them sound amazing, especially a lot of the main characters. They sound the part. You come across a character who is the right-hand man of the lord of the area, and he's going to talk like it. He's going to engage with you like it. And he's going to have an accent that fucking blows your socks off. Now, going on to some of the other accents, there's a priest, and he is very American. I don't know if this was supposed to be on purpose or not, but everybody has this like super thick European accent. And sometimes the main character, Henry, his accent will kind of go up and down in scale. Like sometimes he'll be at a 10 and that accent will just be going off. And then other times he brings it down to a 5. And his accent just kind of isn't there for some of the things he says. Outside of the accents being a little bit off sometimes, the overall voice acting, it's done super well throughout the entire game. And for all of the other audio systems, part of the RPG elements again is noise. So the type of armor you wear is going to make noise, or maybe it won't as much. But you can actually hear your chainmail and your plate armor clanking around as you're constantly moving. Your horse sounds great, all the people in the world kind of chattering when you're in a city, the swords clashing together when you're in a combat situation. It all sounds robust and well put together. But whenever it comes to music, that's where this game sort of fails. There's not really any, but I don't take that as a negative. This game is super big on realism and RPG, etc. I'm gonna keep saying that over and over throughout this. But obviously, to be more engaged in this game, there's not going to be a ton of music. Now, in some of the cutscenes in certain zones, yeah, when you're running around in the open world, a little bit of music might come on here and there, but it's not really there. But that's okay for me in this game. It makes sense that there's not a ton of music just randomly bellowing tunes at me while I'm in the middle of a sword fight, you know? But when it did have the little touches, that's where I enjoyed it. So where they did place the music in this game was done well. It sounded great. And then now we're going to get into my biggest negative, which I'm going to spend probably a large portion talking about. So, as everybody's probably ever heard with this game or knows about this game, is the combat fucking sucks. Not only does it suck, but that's the reason why I quit the game. The combat is nearly impossible in some cases. Now, after doing a ton of research on Reddit and all these other places and forums, whatever it is, I still gave up. People were saying things like, hey, Henry starts as a peasant. You have to practice. You have to get better with a sword, with a mace, with a shield, and have good armor, and keep the condition of it very high for it to work out well. And then you have to learn how to actually maneuver within the combat. Now, I spent a large number of hours trying to learn this combat system, training with Sir Bernard in the field, and just fighting random bandits when I could. But at about halfway through the game, there is one mission where you're raiding a bandit camp. Well, I'm going to describe this in a bit of detail, so it's a little bit of a spoiler, so I'm going to apologize ahead of time, but there's a mission about halfway through where you're going to raid this bandit camp, and at the end of it, there is a boss battle. Now, there's a ton of people with you. You go in there with a small army of like 30, 40 people, and you're in there working your way through this camp, and you're having to take out these archers while your other guys are taking out everybody with melee, and you can run in there and do stuff as well. Well, I was having a blast. I made it through the entire camp, but I got hurt a little bit. So I ended up at about 20% health by the end of going through this camp. Well, there is pretty much a boss fight at the end. With that boss fight, you start off with your HP at what it ended at the end of the camp. So not only did I barely make it through this entire camp of these enemies coming in and just kind of dogpiling me and my people, but I finally made it through it. And whenever I did, I was punished by only having 10 to 20% health fighting a boss. I also forgot to mention here that you cannot regenerate your health or stamina while in combat. So you go directly from fighting the bandits inside of the camp to the boss fight, and there is no pause that allows you to regenerate anything. And you literally cannot win if you do that. It is impossible. You cannot outmaneuver him. You cannot win. Because all it takes is for your stamina to go away where you can't block, and then that allows him to get one clean hit, bam, you're dead. So the moment that you run out of stamina in this game when you're attempting to block someone, that allows them to get a clean hit in. When they get that clean hit in, they'll combo it. They'll hit you 3 or 4 times in a row. And guess what? That kills you instantly. So you get hit one time, and you're dead. So you cannot lose your stamina ever, because if you lose your stamina, you're done. Well, the more health that you lose, the less your stamina gets. So that leads into a bigger drawback. Not only am I dying for my health, now I have a lesser chance of being able to actually fight this person because my stamina is constantly being reduced because my overall health is lowering as well. So when I first attempted this boss fight, I spent about 45 minutes to an hour trying to fight him at this 20% health threshold until I gave up. I said, you know what? Let's go back, we'll restart, we'll go through this bandit camp one more time, and we'll play it super duper safe. I'm just going to sit back with a bow and arrow, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to go in there and do any melee, nothing else. Well, that was also a point of frustration, because not only is the bow and arrow gameplay not very fun and engaging in the first place, but sometimes the enemies with the bow and arrows, oh, they can just shoot you in the forehead and one-shot you, bam, you're dead. That's it. So you try to engage with them from a range with combat, you shoot them with one arrow, maybe in the chest, they don't die, they shoot you in the head with an arrow when there's 6 other archers near them as well shooting at your teammates. Well, that one shot kills you, restart, try again. So after doing this for about an hour, going through this camp, dying 20 times or so, finally getting through it by hiding and cheesing behind a building, coming out and letting an arrow loose to finally hit somebody. And just doing that same thing over and over again, having the most unfun time trying to play with the bow and arrow combat. Then I finally made it through the entire bandit camp and made it to the boss with 100% of my health. Well, the enemy is just too damn good. He's too skilled. So even though he doesn't have a helmet, every time I try to hit him, he just blocks it. Every single time. I am unable to get one single hit in. I spent an hour and a half trying to fight this guy. Even if I did get a hit in, he would block it, but not perfect block it. So he wouldn't actually take any damage. Well, guess what? Even though I hit him multiple times and he's supposed to be losing stamina, that would never happen. He would never get low enough to where I could get a clean hit in the way that the game should be fair, where they are treated just like I am, right? The enemy has stamina just like I have stamina, or according to the rules of the game, that's what they say is going to happen. Well, that's a fucking lie. This guy has infinite stamina, and he will just one-shot you. After spending the previous hour and a half or so doing everything else I just previously described, I give up, and I instead go to Google, and I say, hey, what's the best way to beat this guy? And they say, pull out your bow and arrow and shoot that motherfucker in the eyes. You know what I did? I pulled out that bow and arrow, and I fucking shot him in the forehead. And I killed that bitch. But I did not have fun doing it. I had to engage in this combat system for an hour and a half, attempting to learn it perfectly, utilizing the perfect block system, and then I would parry and riposte and attack and back and forth, and it would always end up with him shoving me on the ground and then hitting me, making my stamina go down, even though I would perfect block everything that I could. Then he would sprint at me, throw me on the ground, and kill me. This was the most frustrating and unfun thing I had played in so long. I had to stop playing the game at one point because I was actually genuinely getting angry, which I don't do at any game ever. And I've played almost every single Souls-like there is. But that's how frustrating the combat is. Then I said, you know what? I was able to get past that boss. Let's go ahead and keep trying some other stuff. I even tried to swap to maces and other types of weapons. I even went to find random bandits and started leveling up that way. And never did I feel good about it. Never did the combat strike me as, this is engaging, this is fun, this is interesting, I feel skilled. It was more or less just, can I hit the guy before he hits me? And if I can't, I'm gonna die. But if I can get a hit off on him, maybe that'll lead into a second hit and he will just die because I'm high enough level and I have a good enough weapon. That didn't seem fun. It didn't seem like any skill was involved. It was just whether or not the guy could perfect block my stuff, and if not, I would win. If he did, I would lose. That's the end of combat. Now, the point that actually truly ended it for me was I went back to the original town that burned down, and there was a bunch of bandits fighting each other. I show up, and I'm like, hey, you know what? Let me get in on this. Well, there's like 3 or 4 bandits fighting another group of 3 or 4 bandits. Well, what did they do when I walk up? They both turn and engage me at the same time, so I have 7 to 8 bandits now running at me trying to kill me. Well, you get shoved to the ground and all of them just surround you and bash your fucking head in. Good time, right? Fun. I kept trying to retry this combat, and I even waited until one side killed out the other. So one side killed the other one, there was only 2 or 3 bandits left. I would try to engage with them. Well, anytime there's more than one enemy on the screen, you just get surrounded or shoved to the ground until one of them starts hitting you and you die, again, in 2 to 3 hits. This is not fun. I say again, this is not fun. So after going through all of this, I said, you know what? Let's just go through and find some random bandits on the side of the road. So I start going around with my horse. I spend about an hour kind of trying to find different bandits. Can't really find any here and there. Well, finally, I go to fast travel. And whenever I go to fast travel, these little events pop up that say, hey, there's a weird thing on the road there. Do you want to engage with it? I said, yeah, we're trying to find some bandits to level up or maybe try the combat out a little more and practice just a little bit more because apparently maybe I'm just fucking bad at the game. But no, I'm not bad at the game. The game is just unfair and fucked. So I come across these bandits. It's a group of 3 armored to the teeth fucking bandits, right? As soon as I come up on them, because I engage in it, so it takes me out of the fast travel system, knocks me off my horse, which is funny because in the fast travel thing in the loading screen, it says, hey, you can run away from any combat at any time. That's also a fucking lie. Because if you get knocked off your horse for any reason, if you try to get back on your horse, you just get instantly knocked off again. And not because the enemy is there and pushing you off. No, your horse just says, fuck you, and knocks you right off. So after dealing with that pain point where I was like, you know what, let's just run away and engage with them with a bow and arrow. Let's not try to do physical combat and do ranged. You can't because your horse says fuck you and just runs away and doesn't let you back on it. It's a good time. But anyway, back to the point of this. I go to engage with these 3 bandits, and again, you get surrounded, you get killed, they have too much armor, they block everything perfectly, they don't allow you to get one single strike in. You're constantly moving backwards to try to dodge and get out of the way of their attacks, and it's impossible. Because at some point, they're going to perfectly block you, and then they're going to shove you, and then another guy is going to hit you from the side. So anytime you're engaging with more than one person, you are going to die. So then I go, you know what? Let's try to find people who don't have maybe great weapons and don't have a bunch of armor. I reload my save, and I go, you know what? Let's try to do this fast travel trick again, but let's keep trying to find a group of bandits that is not so heavily armed. So I do that, and I end up coming across 3 bandits that are only wearing t-shirts and pants, basically, the rags. And they just have swords, no shields, no helmets, no plate armor, no chainmail. Said, you know what? I've got all that stuff. I'm armed to the fucking gills. Let's take this shit on. I got this. Good way to test my combat. Well, first guy runs up at me. He's not as skilled, of course, so I just smack him on top of the head. Bam, he's dead. But the moment that I swing at the second guy, the third guy is on my right, hits me one time in the head, I instantly die. How is that fair? How is that fun? How is that engaging? Guess what? It's not. So at the end of the day, Kingdom Come Deliverance is a great game for everything that it has all tied together in a bow, except for the combat. If you can go through this game and avoid combat at every single turn, I suggest you play it. Or just try your best to fucking chew through it as much as you can, because I played the game for about 40 hours and gave up. Now, a few final thoughts I don't want to put here because this review is already very long. There's a couple moments in here that made me go, damn, this game is really fucking good. And one of those I want to talk about is there's a story quest that's like part of a miniature side quest of the main story, where you go through and you find a priest, the guy that I talked about previously with the American accent, and you apparently go on this all-night bender where women and alcohol are involved, involved. You fight the bailiff, who's basically like the sheriff of the town. And then you have to do a sermon the next morning where you're like throwing slurs out there and stuff. It's crazy. And it's also amazing. I loved it. That portion of this game was honestly my favorite. And if they had more of that, I would be eating it up. So if I could play through this game with stuff like that and avoid the combat where I was just having fun talking to people, goofing around, having an all-night bender with a random priest who's preaching about like the word of God and all these morals and values, and then having sex with women in the middle of the night and ringing the church bell at like 1 in the morning to wake people up. Dude was insane, but that was the highlight of the entire game. Another small thing to describe some of the kind of fancy elements that they put into this game. A couple of hours before I quit it, I was just running through this kind of foresty area, and then there was a dude that started kind of running parallel to me and running up to me, but he didn't have a weapon drawn. So I was like, okay, let's stop, see what he wants. Come to find out, he's a gamekeeper. So he's in the area making sure that the Lord of the land keeps track of anyone who is trying to poach animals illegally. So he walked up to me and just said, "Hey man, what you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm just traveling through." He goes, "Okay, well, I'm the gamekeeper. So if you don't have anything to worry about, I'd like to search your bags. Make sure you don't have any random furs or animal meat on you. That way I know you're not poaching and I won't have to charge you anything or send you to jail." And at the time, luckily, I did not have anything on myself. So I said, "Hey man, go for it. Search through my bags." He goes, "Okay, cool." Searches through them and then goes, "Hey, good job. You were honest. Appreciate it, man. Have a good one." Sends me on my way. Completely random event that occurred in the game. I looked to see where he runs off to afterwards, and under this little bridge thing, he's got this little tent where he's got this tanning rack. He's got a bunch of furs and stuff over there, and that's just his little camp where he lives. And I did not even see it. I was just running through the woods, and it was in this little section that he had kind of cordoned off on his own, and that was just his little place to vibe and do what he was told to do his job and get paid to do it. And that's the engaging parts of this world, where you can sit there, do your job, get paid to do it, and just have fun. You can go and talk to all the merchants. You can go drink and have bar fights, and you can engage in the systems of this game and have a blast. But whatever you do, either one, get really fucking good at the combat or spend enough time, and I mean a lot of time, more than I did, leveling up to where your gear and your levels are going to outmatch anything in a combat, where you can just kind of smash through everybody and everything. But I don't have 100+ hours to throw into just combat in a single game. If I put 30 to 40 hours into a game and the combat is literally stopping me from progressing the main storyline, then I'm gonna stop playing it. Because it's not about difficulty in the idea of Dark Souls or Ninja Gaiden that I just played recently. Those games have difficulty, but you can learn to overcome it. This one, seemingly, you cannot overcome. My skill did not matter, because the enemy was always going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But either way, that's going to be it for this review. I talked a ton about so many different things, but this is a big game. The sequel does come out in a few days, and again, I will be playing it. And then the one small thing that I hated about it is not going to stop me from playing the sequel. So I do hope maybe they improve the combat, or maybe I could just fucking get good, right? Because that's what everyone online says about this game. But if you want to play it, I say pick it up, try it out, engage with it, or don't. But either way, I did not finish this game, and I don't think you have to enjoy what it brings to the table. So after all that, I say pick it up if you want to. If not, watch a playthrough. And I hope you enjoyed this very long review. But of course, if you like this review, I have a ton more coming out and a ton more that I've posted recently. And if you can, do all the YouTube stuff, like the video, subscribe, comment down below about how you love the combat or how I'm a piece of shit who couldn't learn it, whatever it is. But either way, I'll see you next time.